Have you ever looked around and thought, why do the worst people seem to succeed? The liars, the cheaters, the manipulators, they climb the ladder, while the honest, hard-working ones get left behind. It feels unfair, but what if fairness was the illusion? Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So today, we're diving into something the sources you sent us really grapple with. It's that often uncomfortable observation, isn't it? That sometimes it just feels like the, quote, worst people succeed.
It's a feeling lots of us have had, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look around and things don't always seem fair or reward integrity. And your sources really capture that tension, trying to make sense of it.
Absolutely. You've given us this collection of notes, thoughts, quotes, all wrestling with this pattern. So our mission here is to unpack these sources, look at the different angles they present, and try to figure out why this seems to happen so often.
And the sources warn us up front, this isn't just a simple good versus evil thing.
No, it gets much deeper, right down to the nature of power itself, apparently.
Okay, so let's set the stage. This uncomfortable reality. Your sources don't pull any punches about how frustrating it feels. There's that note you included saying something like, dumb people put narcissists, sociopaths, even psychopaths on pedestals.
Yeah, pretty blunt. While the ethical, balanced people get overlooked.
And then those quotes you found really hammer it home, like that Bukowski one.
Oh yeah, the worst men have the best jobs. The best men have the worst jobs or are unemployed. Whew.
It's stark, isn't it? Doesn't exactly paint a rosy picture of how things work.
Not at all. And he comes up again, linking it to confidence or maybe overconfidence.
Right. The problem with the world is that the intelligent people are full of doubts, while the stupid ones are full of confidence.
And your notes add that this often comes with a wicked mindset of manipulation. It's not just confidence, it's weaponized confidence, maybe.
Seems like it. And that Yeats quote fits right in. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity.
It really speaks to who pushes forward, who asserts themselves, doesn't it?
Definitely. And all this challenges what some of your sources call the myth of meritocracy.
Ah, yes. The idea that success is purely based on talent and hard work.
Exactly. The sources push back, saying, look, merit can be a factor, sure, but often. It's recommendation, cheating, lying, manipulation, etc. That's how many get by.
That's a tough pill to swallow, especially when the sources follow up saying, we love to believe the lie that the game is fair.
Right. It's a comforting lie, they say. We avoid acknowledging that maybe fairness is simply a word without meaning in the real world.
Wow. That hits hard, especially for, high performers trying to play by the rules like you mentioned in your notes.
Yeah, you see others breaking the rules and winning, and it makes you question the whole system.
So, okay, we see this frustrating reality. How do the sources suggest we even start to understand why it happens?
Well, they pivot to philosophy. Specifically, they bring in Friedrich Nietzsche.
Okay, Nietzsche, what's the core idea here from the source's perspective?
The main takeaway seems to be about power. Power isn't this abstract moral concept, good or evil. It's presented as more of a fundamental force of life, like physics, almost.
So not inherently good or bad, it just is.
That's the gist. And to understand why the seemingly worst rise, we need to understand how power actually works, according to this view.
And this leads to his concepts of master morality and slave morality. The sources use an analogy, right? Two warriors.
Exactly. Imagine one warrior who's strong, decisive, acts, takes initiative.
Okay.
And another who's maybe more hesitant, waits for permission, seeks approval, less assertive.
Got it. So master morality is the first warrior.
Pretty much. According to the source's explanation, this is the morality of the strong, the leaders, the conquerors. Their values are things like strength, courage, ambition, things that help them dominate or create or assert their will.
And good is just
Yeah.
whatever helps them do that.
Essentially, yes. They define their own worth internally. They don't really look for outside approval. Weakness is just something to overcome.
Okay, makes sense in that context. And slave morality, that's the hesitant warrior.
Right. This morality arises from those who are oppressed or lack power. It flips the values. So humility, obedience, even suffering, these become virtues.
Why? How does that help?
The sources frame it as a psychological adaptation, a way to make sense of your situation and survive when you can't dominate. Power itself starts to look evil from this perspective.
Okay, here's where it gets really tricky, based on the sources. They argue slave morality doesn't actually stop the ruthless.
No, quite the opposite. Might even enable them.
Oh.
By condemning ambition, by shaming the drive for power. It makes people who adhere to that morality hesitant. they hold back.
Ah, so it leaves the field open.
Exactly. For those who don't care about that moral framework, who operate more from a master morality perspective, they see an opportunity and they just take it, while others are debating if it's right.
And the sources link this to traits often seen in powerful people. High ambition, less fear, maybe reduced empathy.
Yeah, though one note is careful to say this doesn't mean they're all psychopaths, but they might have traits allowing them to act more decisively without the same emotional constraints that might hold others back.
It's like that nature analogy in the sources. The lion, the storm. Survival isn't about being nice.
Right. It's about strength, adaptability.
Yeah.
And the sources suggest that under the surface of society, that primal battle is still going on.
And the lesson is, hesitation is bad. Power is taken.
That's a key takeaway from this perspective, yeah. Power isn't usually just handed over. You have to claim it.
Which challenges a belief many of us, well, want to hold on to, that the world is basically fair.
That good deeds get rewarded, justice prevails eventually. Your sources tackle this head on.
They call it a social construct, a comforting illusion.
Yeah, basically a story we tell ourselves to maintain order. Not necessarily because it reflects cold, hard reality.
And they link it to that psychological idea, the just world fallacy.
Right. Believing people get what they deserve. And the sources are pretty blunt. They call the belief dangerous.
Dangerous how?
Because if you just assume goodness alone brings success, you might become passive. You don't learn the rules of competition, strategy, how power actually works.
And while you're waiting for the universe to be fair,
others who don't have that illusion are making moves, taking action.
Although it's interesting, one source does throw in that line. Life is fair in a way beyond our understanding, like a deeper cosmic fairness.
Yeah, there's that tension in the material itself.
Yeah.
Between the harsh reality we often observe and maybe a deeper, less obvious sense of balance.
But the immediate point about the comforting illusion is, don't let it make you passive.
That seems to be the warning, yes. Don't let the belief in fairness stop you from engaging with the world as it is.
Okay, so this leads to the big question, right? If the ruthless often succeed, do I have to become ruthless too?
Feels like the logical endpoint, doesn't it? Especially when you see, like your notes say, unethical or even lazy people getting ahead while hardworking folks struggle.
Yeah, exactly. Do I have to throw my values out the window?
Well, the sources actually explore another option, what they call a third path.
A third path. Okay, tell me more.
It's about finding a way to compete, to be effective in the world, without becoming one of those worst people. It's trying to balance strategic thinking with, integrity.
Okay, I'm listening. What does this third path involve, according to the sources?
All right, first key element seems to be accepting reality.
So, dropping the illusion of fairness we just talked about.
Pretty much. The sources say the biggest weakness is clinging to the idea that life should be fair. Strong competitors. They accept early on that it isn't always. They learn the rules, including the rules of power.
But this doesn't mean becoming unethical yourself.
No, that's the key distinction. It's about recognizing the playing field, understanding power is neutral, not inherently evil, just understanding how things actually work.
Okay, what's next?
Second, strategic empathy.
Strategic empathy.
That sounds calculated.
It is, in a way. It's not about feeling sympathy that makes you vulnerable. It's about deeply understanding people, their motives, how they think, anticipating their moves.
So you can navigate tricky situations, even deception.
Exactly. But the crucial part is using that understanding strategically without becoming deceptive yourself. It's insight as a tool.
Interesting. Okay, third element.
Developing internal power. Ah, this sounds more like self-improvement.
Very much so. It's about mastering your own fears. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of standing out or being unpopular.
Embracing discomfort, taking risks.
Yeah, like that anecdote in the source about someone being called an outsider, living on the fringe and taking it as a compliment. Choosing your own path, not just following others.
Not waiting for things to happen, like that line, everything comes to those who don't wait.
Exactly. Creating your own opportunities. This ties back to that Nietzschean Übermensch idea, not in a dominating way, but in overcoming your own limitations, becoming stronger from within.
And you mentioned the mind decoding source too, suggesting working on subconscious beliefs can help here.
Right, reinforcing that idea that a lot of this power comes from your own inner landscape, your mindset.
Okay, makes sense. What's the fourth element? This one sounds a bit more edgy. Controlled ruthlessness.
Yeah, the name is intense. But the sources describe it less as being cruel and more about the ability to make tough decisions without endless hesitation.
Like what kind of decisions?
Like the note about cutting toxic relationships out, like cancer. Or making necessary but unpopular calls in leadership. Confronting difficult truths instead of avoiding them.
So it's about decisiveness and strength in difficult moments, not just being mean.
That's how the sources frame it, yes.
Yeah.
Strength, not necessarily cruelty.
Okay. And the fifth element.
Creating value. This one feels really important.
Creating value, how does that fit in?
This is presented as the, maybe, true source of lasting power. Not just taking or manipulating, but actually building something worthwhile.
A business, an idea, a community.
Any of those. Something that has real value. Because if you create genuine value, you become indispensable. People need what you offer.
And the sources have that line. You do not need to manipulate because your power is earned, not stolen.
Exactly. It's a fundamental difference.
Yeah.
Earned power through creation versus stolen power through manipulation or force.
This connects to that example in the sources about creating good environments, right? Like a workplace that feels like a family.
Yes. Where people are treated well, feel valued. The source notes this might even look like wasting resources to a purely cutthroat perspective.
But it works.
The source argues it works brilliantly, even for purely selfish reasons, because people want to help you succeed. They're invested. That's earned influence, earned power.
And your notes really highlight this alternative path, don't they? Being a kind person is the best thing we can become.
Right. And that direct statement, psychopathy is not a strength, empathy is not a weakness, that strongly pushes back against the idea that you have to be ruthless.
So this third path is about being smart, strong, decisive, and fundamentally constructive and ethical.
That seems to be the ideal presented, yes. It loops back to that Ubermensch idea again, but reframing it. It's not about dominating others, it's about self-overcoming, mastering yourself.
Rejecting victimhood, questioning rules, shaping your own destiny, power from within.
Yeah, and that kind of power doesn't need constant external validation or rely on deception, unlike the power sought by the truly ruthless, which often comes from insecurity.
So let's loop back to power itself then. After exploring all this, is power fundamentally evil, or is it just a tool?
The sources, leaning on that Nietzschean interpretation, really suggested it's more like a tool or a drive. The drive for power, in this view, isn't just about crushing others.
It's about self-improvement, becoming more.
Yeah, surpassing your own limits, striving for something greater, overcoming yourself.
But history is full of examples of power corrupting, right? The sources acknowledge that. Leaders falling into ego, tyranny.
Absolutely, it's a clear pattern. Which leads to the paradox. Is the power itself evil, or does it just reveal and amplify the darkness already present in someone's character?
Like that Frank Herbert quote you included, power doesn't corrupt, but the corrupt are drawn to power.
Exactly. That captures the essence of this perspective. Power is maybe more of a magnifier.
So Nietzsche's view, as the sources present it, is that power in its purest form isn't malicious.
It's more about self-mastery, creating new values, forging your own reality. Rejecting conventional constraints might even be embodying a truest form of life in this philosophical framework.
The key thing is intent.
Seems to be. Is the goal to dominate others out of insecurity? Or is it about this process of self-overcoming, building, creating your own meaning?
So the conclusion from the sources seems to be power isn't inherently bad.
Right, it's a tool. Wielded with integrity and focused on creation. It can lead to great things.
Yeah.
Used selfishly for oppression, it reveals darkness.
And the sources suggest those who rise purely through ruthlessness. They might rise fast, but they don't last.
Yeah, there's that idea that their power, built on exploitation, is unstable.
Yeah.
They're programmed to self-destruct, never satisfied, fighting internal battles.
Contrasting with the idea that a moral solution lasts long because it actually solves problems.
Exactly. Sustainable versus destructive.
So the challenge then isn't to fear power or avoid it,
But to master it. First and foremost, mastering yourself. Through discipline, inner strength, and focusing on becoming more than you are. That's the Nietzschean challenge presented in your sources.
Wow. Okay, this has definitely been a deep dive. We've gone through that tough observation about the worst succeeding, dug into some Nietzsche with master-slave morality and the Ubermensch,
Grappled with that illusion of fairness.
and importantly, explored this potential third path, competing effectively but with integrity, focusing on inner strength and creating value.
All based on the fascinating, sometimes contradictory, but always thought-provoking material you sent us.
So let's leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on, drawn from these themes. If power isn't inherently evil, if it's potentially a tool for creation and self-overcoming. What does mastering your own power look like for you? Especially when navigating a world that sometimes seems to reward the very opposite.
So I'm going to keep exploring.